Good afternoon and welcome to A Sheep Speaks. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today. Those of you who watch my videos are probably used to me going through my Apples of Gold, a devotional and rhyme, picking out one theme for each week and then putting a little message, a few scriptures to go along with that. But I've decided to also start, I'm not going to discontinue that, but I've also decided to start reading out of A Sheep Speaks. And that is my testimony, my memoir, whatever you want to call it. And and I'm going to read the preface first and then read one chapter a week. Hopefully it'll happen on Tuesdays, but I'm not sure. I'm on Friday right now, I realize that. So, but anyway, I wanted to just get this out there because I know a lot of people don't like to read. I didn't like to read until I met the Lord when I was in my 30s. So since I don't have an audio book, we're going to just make do with this. So I'm just going to read, like I said, the preface. And this is kind of what caused me to write the book in the first place. But I said, I had been wanting to write down the story of my life for quite some time, only because it's too crazy for anyone to believe. But I kept putting it off because it seemed like such a daunting task. But praise God, the Lord finally gave me the ability to put pen to paper. So here we go. Ready or not? The following chapters are some of the events of my life written down, as well as I can remember them. I've changed some of the names so no one will sue me. Ha. And this is by no means an exhaustive account, so maybe one day there will be a sequel. Or who knows, maybe even a movie, God only knows. So for now, I must say that several of the stories you are about to embark upon will be very difficult to believe. But trust me, they are 100% true. After all, Jesus said to the man who asked him if he was able to do a certain thing, "If you can believe, I can do it." So Jesus says to us, if we can believe, he can do it. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if he has ever done something for someone in the past, he is able to do it for you. So we're going to be starting off in part 1, chapter 1, called The Voyage Begins, a tale that was told. And the first chapter is Shenanigans. It was a hot Texas afternoon when Chrissy and I decided, even though we did not have a saddle or a harness, we wanted to ride Chrissy's horse that her dad kept in our backyard, in my backyard. Realizing that my mom would not be home from work anytime soon, and Chrissy's dad was busy working in his garden, we figured, well, who's going to find out? So always being up for a little mischief, I talked Christy into getting Ranger out of the barn, and we agreed to take turns riding him around the yard, holding on to the horse's mane. What could go wrong, right? Chrissy's dad bought it for her birthday, on her 12th birthday. Chrissy's lap around the house was pretty uneventful. Now it was my turn. So Chrissy demounted Ranger and handed him over to me. Things didn't go so well on my lap around the yard. Ranger suddenly took off on his own as if something had spooked him, and I went flying off. As soon as I fell, Ranger, being the well-trained horse that he was, he stopped dead in his tracks. Whew, that was close. I found myself lying on my back looking at the bottom of Ranger's belly. This was the one time when our antics would not be discovered by either of our parents. We quickly led Ranger back to the fenced backyard, feeling relieved that at least we didn't get caught, which was most times not the case. Christy and Susan were sisters, and they lived 4 houses down from me across the street. And when the 3 of us weren't up to some shenanigans, one or more of us was usually in some way planning our next exploits. Christy and Susan were originally from Louisiana, and I found it particularly funny when her parents would argue in front of us. They always spoke French. I lived alone with my mother, Lola, in a small wood frame house with window units and an attic fan. We didn't have much money as my mom and dad had separated years ago when I was about 6 years old. Our family had originally moved to Florida, but when my grandmother died from an awful car accident, my mom and I flew back to Texas. We flew back to Texas for the funeral. I would find out later that my mom had been longing for a way to get out of her unhappy marriage for years, and now was her chance. Since our house in Texas had not been sold or leased out, because the Florida move was only temporary, my mom and I moved back into that house. She told my dad, David, that she was not coming back to Florida as she was leaving him. This all took place when I was in first grade, so by now I was used to living with a single mom who was pretty laid back and not much of a disciplinarian, which in my mind worked out pretty good for me. So that made me a latchkey kid. That is what they used to call kids who had to come home to an empty house after school. There was no dad in the home, and my mom had to work all day, so that left me in charge, and that's exactly the way I liked it. At the ripe old age of 11, I was responsible for getting myself on the bus for school after my mom left for work, which I missed. I put that in quotation marks because I didn't really miss it, which I missed when I didn't feel like going to school. Back in the 60s, the girls had to wear dresses to school, and they had to be a certain length. But being the rebellious preteen I was, I decided to hem my dress up before I caught the school bus one morning. Although being 11 and not really knowing how to sew, I made the hem much larger than I should have. After all, these were the days of mini skirts for the girls and long hair for the boys, the Beatlemania generation. Having hemmed the skirt to what I thought was a sufficiently short length, I headed out the door for school. After I got off the bus and arrived in my 6th grade homeroom class, my teacher looked like she had seen a ghost. The dress stopped about 2 inches below my derriere. Mrs. Phelps' next words were, "You need to go to the office right now." I shrugged my shoulders as I turned and walked out the door very nonchalantly. On my way to the office, one of the coaches saw me in the hall and immediately said, "You go to the office, young lady." I then took great pleasure in telling him in a condescending way, "That's where I'm going." I already had a rebellious spirit and quite an attitude, even at the tender age of 11. So one balmy Saturday morning, not having much to do, Christy and myself and our friend Sharon decided it would be a great day to go down to the beach in Galveston. We lived right outside of Houston and were only about 50 miles from the beach. However, none of us were old enough to drive, so we thought we would do the next best thing and hitchhike. Somehow we managed to get on the highway that led from Houston to Galveston, and we put out our thumbs. We were off. As you can imagine, it wasn't long before 2 older men pulled over and had us 3 little girls get in their car. This could prove to be a long 50 miles, but unfortunately, we didn't have enough sense between the 3 of us to come in out of the rain, as my mother would always tell me. Well, that was chapter 1. Chapter 2 is entitled Growing Up, and hopefully I'll be reading that next week. I really want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope you're going to enjoy this book. And like I said, it's available on Amazon as a paperback and also as a ebook. I also have copies myself if you want to get in touch with me. The copies of the paperback are $10. The ebook is $2.99 on Amazon, I believe. And so I just want, once again, thank you for stopping by. I'll be back Sunday to go through the lesson that I have planned out of my Apples of Gold, a devotional and rhyme. Thanks a lot.